is your favorite piece here?
Oh my gosh.
I know. I'm sorry. I have to. One of your favorite pieces here.
Let's see.
We are in the car on the way to the Whitney. I have Jordan and Javon with me in the car.
Hello.
And Kara. And we're about to go interview Jennie Goldstein, who is a curator of American art, obviously, at the Whitney. So see you there. Jennie, thank you so much for talking to me today. This is Jennie Goldstein of the Whitney Museum. I'd love to start out by just asking you, you're a curator. What does a curator do? And then specifically, like, what do you do here at the Whitney?
So curators do a number of things. We organize exhibitions, we steward collections, and we do research about artists and art.
Honestly, dream job.
It is a dream.
So cool.
It is a dream job.
That's amazing. And so what is your kind of focus here at the Whitney?
So here at the Whitney, I do all of those things. The Whitney is a museum of 20th and 21st century American art. So it's a collecting institution. We have about 26,000 works of art in every medium you can think of, ranging from 1900 to the present. And as a curator in this department, I do a variety of things. I organize exhibitions, as I was saying before, and those exhibitions can take on different kinds of approaches. So one approach is, working with an artist or working with a group of artists or a topic, and organizing an exhibition around that artist or theme, where you do a lot of research into that topic and work closely with that artist if the artist is living, and borrow works from collections maybe all over the world, either from private collectors or from other museums, and bring those works together to kind of make an argument or show a way into that artist's world. That's one mode. Then there's exhibition making that's derived from collections, from the collections that we have, the works that are in the Whitney's holdings. And we do that as well. And the other thing that we also do is we help to acquire works of art for the collection. Those can come into the collection as gifts from donors. In some cases, we purchase works of art, working with acquisition committees and patrons of the institution. And that's a whole other kind of project of research and discovery and thinking about what kind of collection we're building here, what are the gaps that we want to fill. So those are some of the things that I do with my colleagues here.
So much, so cool. There's so much to unpack. Christine's son Kim called all day, all night.
Yep.
A living artist. I feel like you guys have a relationship with her that goes back a little bit.
Yes.
I saw some moments about a billboard a few years ago. So you obviously worked with her now. Tell me a little bit more about what that's been like working with her, this exhibit specifically too, and what we can expect from it. I'm very excited.
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about it. So Christine's son Kim is a visual artist. She was born in Orange County, but she's based in Berlin. And she is having here at the Whitney in early February, will open an exhibition that's a survey. So that means we're looking at her career to date. So it will look at works from around 2011, when her career sort of started, all the way up to 2024, which is the most recent work that's going to be in our exhibition. And it really ranges across everything that she's done as an artist and a maker. She's primarily an artist who works in drawing, but she also makes really large-scale murals that are often derived from her drawings. She makes shaped canvases. She makes a lot of video work. She's made some ceramics. There's going to be documentation of some of her early performances. So her work is largely engaged with sound, questions of sound, the politics of sound, the ways in which we encounter it, the power that it can hold. And this can take the form of musical notation. It can take the form of other forms of measuring space, like infographics, like pie charts. She often engages deeply with American Sign Language, which is her native language. And so she thinks a lot about her lived experience and how she navigates the world that is, primarily hearing-dominated world, and how ASL, which is the language and a kind of culture, that how that shapes her experience and how she navigates life. So she's really interested in questions of spatiality. She's interested in questions of family and navigating family. And largely her art is all about communication, the ways in which sound does and doesn't affect communication, and how we interact with each other. So it's going to be really, really interesting. And it's going to have a really interesting way of being presented here at the Whitney. So it's going to actually be on 3 different floors. So it's going to have this kind of echo, this recurrence, which is an ongoing theme in her work. So yeah, and she and I have had a longstanding relationship because I did ask her to do a billboard back in 2018. So we have this public art space that we use at the Whitney. It's a billboard across from the southern tip of the High Line on Gansevoort Street. And at the time, she'd never made anything that big. So I approached her and I thought her charcoal drawings, which are really graphic. They use a lot of language, a lot of kind of gestural marking on the page. I thought that this would translate really well to this larger scale, but we didn't totally know. It was a little bit of a leap of faith for both of us. And then what she discovered was that her work really did scale up, and that it made her feel like she could take up a lot of space, right? Like, and who takes up space as an artist and in the art world is a really important question to be thinking about.
Yeah.
And is something that has led her to work at really large scales ever since. So we have this kind of deep connection from that, but she herself has a deep connection with the Whitney, because before she devoted her life to being a full-time artist, she worked as an educator. And she actually worked as a freelance educator here at the Whitney and helped to start the Whitney's ASL tours, which are Whitney Signs, which are tours led by deaf educators for deaf audiences. So the idea is, instead of having deaf audiences come and having a tour that's interpreted into ASL, that the tours are led by deaf educators.
Wow.
And that's actually a really profound shift. And the Whitney was among the first museums to do that. And she helped to build that program here.
Cool.
So for her, having her show here, having the survey here, is a little bit of a kind of like a homecoming for her, like a full circle for her. Well, I shouldn't say full circle because she has a lot more career to come, but career to
The
date.
first lap, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. The first lap. And then we're co-organizing the exhibition with the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis. So then it will travel to Minneapolis.
What a major exhibition of her work. That's incredible. I love hearing this backstory too, because I think that to me is what's so exciting about this, and learning about the artist is really their whole story. So that's incredible. Do you literally just like work with her directly to bring this to life, and kind of like, how does that work? How are you guys like, how do the decisions get made? How are you partnering with her? I'd love to know more about that relationship.
Well, it takes lots of different kinds of valences. I mean, the show is being co-curated. There are 3 curators, and so the 3 of us work really, really closely together and meet regularly. And we, luckily, she's a very well organized artist, and so we were able to have access to her full database of kind of everything she's made, and really think about what we wanted to include, because that is a big part of what we do as curators, is we make decisions, right, about what to include, what works are the ones that kind of embody a certain moment in an artist's career, or what are the works that, are really helping to tell the kind of stories that we want to tell. I actually love the sign for curator and ASLs like this. So it's like you're like literally picking.
And that's the decision. I love it.
Well, this is for person, like curator.
That's so cool.
So anyway, I just think that's so like apt, right? It's so telling of like what we do, the ways in which we make, bring our expertise and our sense of the space, like what works well in our own museum gallery spaces. And then we wanted to really range her, across what she's done. So that helped shape everything as well. And we work with her really closely. We worked with her to help decide, who the authors that would contribute to the catalog. We worked with her on this really incredible illustrated timeline that's going to be in the book, where she really opens up about her life and her childhood. It's fascinating. We're working with her in all kinds of ways. She'll work with our press office. She works with our education department. She's going to help us make a kids guide. She's very excited about the kids guide. But some things we do, I was just with her the other day and I was saying, and I was telling her a story about something and she was like, oh, why didn't I know this already? And I said, well, that's curator business. Like, I was like, that's curator work. You do the artist work. I was like, let me handle this other thing, So there are ways in which she can't be involved in everything we're doing, nor can we be involved in everything she's doing. But it's our job to support her and to help make her dreams come true. Truly, I know that sounds maybe a little corny, but that is a big part of what we do, is to bring artists' visions to life.
You also have another exhibition coming up even sooner called Shifting Landscapes.
Yes.
Not all the artists are with us. It's also across 80 artists, I believe.
Yes,
so
something like that.
How do you, I can't even wrap my brain around that, but how do you kind of interpret work, get access to kind of the intent behind the work for artists who aren't with us, and then follow up on that as like connecting the dots between different artists? What is that like? Talk to me about that one.
I'm trying to think of like a short way to answer a question like that. So Shifting Landscapes is a collection show. So it's a kind of thematic look at works from the Whitney's collection.
Okay.
So the works range from the 60s to the present. And as you mentioned already, there's about 80 artists, over 100 works, many of which are going on view for the very first time, in part because some are new acquisitions, works that have entered the collection in the last 5 years or so.
Okay.
And so if an artist is alive, then sure, you can talk to them about their work and get their insight. Not all artists want to talk about their intention, or they may have a certain way of thinking about the work, but we might bring another way of thinking about the work. So it's always a kind of conversation. Curators are also art historians. That's part of what we do, is that we read and we research and we think about the kinds of stories that artists are telling and how that fits into kind of larger conversations of art and art history. So that's a big part of what it takes. So if an artist isn't alive, if there's existing scholarship on them, if they've had exhibitions of their work in the past, and there's catalogs and we can read, sometimes there might be archival material that we can review, and sometimes it's just connections we are making, and it might be one that an artist has never thought of before, and sometimes they're excited by that, right? Like, oh, what if we put your work in a gallery that's thinking about this aspect of a landscape, and they might say, wow, that's exciting to be in relationship with other artists in this configuration. I think for a lot of artists, having their works end up in museum collections is tremendously fulfilling and satisfying, because they know we're going to take care of it, right? That's our job. We're stewards of these collections. And B, they hope that we will then use the works, right? Put them on view, have audiences be able to engage with them and learn from them, and maybe learn from them in different kinds of ways. So the context that a curator might put a certain painting in, let's just say in one decade, could be totally recontextualized in another. And that's the work. History is always evolving and changing and shifting.
Coolest job on the planet. Investigative journalism meets I don't know. So cool. I can't wait to see both of those exhibits. Everybody who's listening has to go see them. When you mentioned your relationship with Christina in the first billboard you did, and it was taking a chance, taking a leap of faith for both of you, it seems like that's kind of what the Whitney does a lot of times, which I think is so interesting, so progressive. There's so many now kind of famous or very well-known American artists who got their start here. Edward Hopper, I was talking about as like my favorite example, but talk to me about a couple of your other favorites of like artists who maybe now like everybody knows or they're very common, but like it was a total chance at the beginning.
Right. Well, so as I was saying before, the collection is 1900 to the present, and the museum started as a kind of a club. Like the Whitney's history is really interesting. Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney, who started the Whitney, she didn't set out to start a museum. That was really not her intention. She was an heiress. She was born into the Vanderbilt family, but she was also an artist, and she wanted to make art. She was a sculptor. And in the early 19-teens, which is when she was a young woman making art, there was just no infrastructure to support contemporary American art just think about what the landscape of the art world looked like then. Like there was no MoMA in the 19 teens. No. There were hardly any commercial galleries. If you were an artist and you wanted to be radical in any way, avant-garde in any way, you went to Paris, right? You went to Europe. That's where all the really radical writers and thinkers and poets and philosophers were heading to be around other radical thinkers. There just wasn't a kind of infrastructure here. And so she just found herself, because of the nature of her own interest in making art and wanting commissions, like wanting to be a working artist. And then having artists in her community, because artists are always friends with artists, right? They know each other, they support each other. She just found herself kind of organically becoming part of a kind of support infrastructure. So her home on West 8th Street just became this like hub, like a club. She would host still life drawing classes. People would come and hang out and drink and eat, and her rooms became, galleries, kind of domestic spaces. It's so fun to look at the installation photography that exists from that era, because you see, paintings on the wall, but then heavy drapes and furniture, right? It's very domestic. She would often buy artists' work, because she loved it, but also because she wanted to support them, or she would pay their rent, or she would send someone to Paris. Like she helped support Edward Hopper when he wanted to go to Paris to paint in 1908, 1909. So she just found herself in this position where she was supporting all of these artists who were really interested in, in some cases, a kind of gritty urban realism that was kind of de rigueur at that time, or just other artists that didn't have support. And then she amassed this kind of personal collection of some like 500 things, like before you know it. And art collectors often talk about this feeling of like you start small and then you kind of can't stop, because it's so satisfying to collect art. And I'm sure she felt the same way. And then she was sort of at a crossroads where it was like, well, what do I do with all this art, and how do I make it more available to people? And then she tried to donate the collection to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which was then the only game in town. This is the late 1920s. MoMA was just coming into existence, also founded by women. And the director of the Met wasn't interested in the work. It was really contemporary work. There wasn't a lot of support for that at the time. He was like, oh, that will all just kind of end up in the basement. Didn't want to take that on.
Famous last words.
Exactly. And so that was really when she felt like, okay, I have to turn what I've been doing in a more casual way, the kind of Whitney studio, or studio club as it was called then, into a real museum. And so by 1931, that's where she was. The home became a museum, and supported, like you were saying before, artists like Edward Hopper. And then later, as the museum became, bigger, grew out of her home, moved to another location, lots of really famous artists got early starts at the museum. Like artists like Jasper Johns had early exhibitions here, Cindy Sherman, Jay DeFeo, all these kind of amazing artists had early exhibitions here. And this is sort of baked into the way we work, because since 1932, and this was under Gertrude and the first director of the Whitney, whose name was Juliana Force, they did this together. They started a kind of biannual, and then for a while it was annual exhibition of what was happening right now in contemporary art. At the time, it was really around them, kind of in the New York scene that they were a part of. And that's all about risk, because you're essentially saying, this is what's happening now, right now. Yeah. Like, let's see what's going on right now and put it on view. And some of those works end up in the Whitney's collection, or end up in other museums' collections, or some of those artists, sort of disappear from the record, and others become, very famous and successful, or make a really lasting impact. And because we do that every 2 years, kind of always taking these risks to support artists at kind of early and more formative stages of their career. And that's really become the Whitney's kind of like signature exhibition. Like, people know the Whitney Biennial, right? Yeah. They come knowing that every 2 years they're going to get to come here, and like the whole museum is going to be taken over by exciting, fresh, new, ideas that maybe you've never seen before, artists maybe you've never heard of before. You kind of always count on that.
That's so cool. That's so cool. And now, famously, the Met does have an American museum, or American wing. Right. What changed?
Well, it's not just. It's more the contemporary thing
than the American thing.
Yes and no, right? I mean, the Met, the Met has become more invested. I should not speak to other museums. You should speak to curators there, but they have become more interested over the years, as have all museums, in modern and contemporary art. I think that's kind of fair to say.
And is that because of the Whitney really taking a stand?
Well, I don't. Sure. No, I don't know. I think it's just a part of a kind of general turn towards the contemporary. But it's hard to. It's a little apples to oranges, right? Totally. Because the Met is an encyclopedic museum, and the Whitney does this. By comparison, it's like tiny slice, right? 124 years of art versus thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So, they can allocate their resources accordingly.
Yeah.
But yes, they have a robust department of modern and contemporary art. They also have an American department, which is a little different, right? Because American art, you can map back to the colonial period if you want to talk about it in like very quote unquote traditional terms. So that's hundreds of years before modernism.
What is your favorite piece here?
Oh my gosh.
I know. I'm sorry. I have to. One of your favorite pieces here.
Let's see. Well, I'm really excited about a set of photographs that are about to go on view in Shifting Landscapes.
Okay.
Which are a series of photographs taken by an artistic duo called Piliamo. It's made up of two artists, Kapulani Landgraf and Mark Hamasaki, and they're both new to the Whitney's collection. And the photographs were taken in the late 80s and early 90s on Oahu. And what they were capturing, using very traditional photographic techniques and darkroom processing to make these kind of sumptuous gelatin silver prints, was a highway, a federally funded highway, the H3, that runs from one side of Oahu to the other, connecting two military points. And it was a federal project that many Hawaiians were adamantly against because the highway is going to be incredibly disruptive to nature, to culture, to all sorts of historic indigenous spaces. And there were many fits and starts over decades before this federal project was finally started, and the two of them were able to, through the contractors, have access to the site of the development of the highway on Sundays, right? Like when they weren't working. And so they would carry all their gear and, hike out into, what had been totally, undeveloped land to track the destruction of these natural resources and of this native place with this highway. And they have this kind of ghost-like presence because nobody's working, right? You can see, bulldozers or other kinds of heavy machinery, and it looks like it's all abandoned, but of course it's just Sunday, right? They're all going to be back to work imminently. And it's this kind of incredible, powerful record of the destruction of this place in order to create this highway, which still exists and one can drive on.
Wow.
And I think these artists are both just very interesting, and I'm really excited that we were able to bring these works into the collection around the same time that we're organizing this show, and it kind of fits so beautifully with some of the themes that we're exploring in the exhibition. So that's among my favorite new works entering the collection. And then something more historic that's been in the collection for a while. Gosh, I guess I would, if I have to pick one thing, maybe Jay DeFeo's The Rose, which is this incredible work that we actually have on view right now that she started making in the late 50s and made for 8 years. This kind of incredible passion project, this deep layering up of paint over many, many years. And it has its own podcast episode worthy story of how it came to be at the Whitney.
Part two.
Yeah, exactly. But it is a work that I have known well and loved and have seen installed several times over the years. And it's always a kind of terrifying thrill because it weighs a literal ton. And I love the Whitney's role in helping to kind of rescue what could have been lost. Because the painting was kind of a little bit forgotten. And yeah, so I'm so grateful to the curators who came before me for all that they've done to build this collection.
Such a lineage. So amazing. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about your 2 upcoming exhibitions that we should know? I want to make sure you have.
What do you think, Emma?
Your piece. Yeah, you've done an amazing job.
You should come. And just to say, these are all, these are collaborations, working on both of these shows with other curators. And I am so lucky to benefit from their expertise and their fellowship. So I hope folks will come.
We'll be
And
there.
the best thing about Shifting Landscapes is it will be up for 15 months. So you'll have a lot of chances to explore.
We'll be there. We cannot wait.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Okay, so the Whitney has this amazing initiative that started, I guess, about 6 months ago, where we are now free to everyone who wants to come here every Friday night from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. And it's a totally good time because in addition to just coming to see art, we always have like DJs, and it just has like a really fun energy, incredible energy. And then the second Sunday of every month, we similarly are free all day, not just 5 to 10, all day. We have all kinds of additional programming on those days as well, especially programming for families. So those are really good opportunities to come and see our shows and spend time here. Free Fridays if you are a person who wants to be out at night, 5 to 10. And then the second Sunday of every month, all kinds of things happen on second Sundays.
Amazing. We will certainly be here. Everybody listening will be here. Thank you again.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Yay.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. I hope you learned a little bit more about the Whitney and definitely are going to plan a visit there. Don't forget to check out Shifting Landscapes, which opens on November 1st, and Christine's Son Kim, All Day All Night, which opens on February 8th, 2025. I'd like to thank our curator, Jennie Goldstein, who gave us her time and also enlightened us about the magical world of curation, as well as Emma Lahaki, who coordinated the whole thing for us. Thank you so much. Bye.